Good afternoon. The Appropriations Subcommittee on State and Local Transportation will come to order, and will the clerk please call the roll for today's attendance?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Steele.
Here.
Representative Slaw.
Present.
Representative Borton.
Here.
Representative DeCina.
Here.
Representative Robinson.
Here.
Representative Morgan.
Here.
Representative Edwards.
Present.
Madam Chair, you have all 7 members present. You have a quorum.
Thank you, sir. Okay, we're moving right along. Representative Borton moves to adopt the minutes of the April 30th meeting. There being no objections, the motion prevails by unanimous consent. Okay, today's committee is to continue discussing ports. The discussion will provide insights from Andrew Sheplers, the Regional Manager and Government of Public Affairs Liaison for Holcim. Mouthful. Mr. Sheplers welcomes to the subcommittee. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for bringing your team. And you'll be discussing how marine transportation works for the private sector and the importance of the healthy ports of Michigan. And before you get started, but thank you for coming today, this is just really a follow-up from when MDOT gave their presentation, and he was not able to have the team here on that same day. And so I just a quick review that we have 3,200 miles of shoreline along 4 of the 5 Great Lakes, containing 33 active cargo ports that ship or receive cargo. Michigan handles 46 million tons of cargo, valued at nearly $9 billion annually, and carries 9% of the state's freight tonnage of 1% of the freight value. And I just wanted to give an overview of our last with MDOT, and then this is the private sector giving us a presentation on how they utilize the ports. And so with that, your turn.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. We appreciate the opportunity to be here. Again, my name is Andrew Sheplers, and I'm the Regional Manager for Government Public Affairs for Holcim, covering here in Michigan and other areas in the Midwest and in the Northeast. So, again, we appreciate the time to be here today. A little bit of information on Holcim, what we do, and kind of the reason why we're here today. So Holcim is the largest manufacturer of building materials in the world, right? And so anything you look at here in the state of Michigan, we have a major production facility, cement production facility in Alpena. We have a major limestone aggregate facility in Presque County, just north of Alpena. And then we have sand and gravel pits throughout the 94 corridor, along with a corporate center down in Dundee. And so one of the great things about our plant in Holcim, when you look at all the buildings today in Lansing when you're outside, there's probably 8 out of 10 chance that the concrete that's used in that material, the cement, came from Alpena. So we have continually helped build the state of Michigan since the early 1900s when the facility was founded. But when you look at another great example, when you land at DTW, that's our material. When you stand in the stands of Comerica Park, Ford Field, Little Caesars Arena, the Big House, right? All of those facilities have Alpena cement in them. So we do touch a lot of different lives here. What some folks might not know is that a company out of Saginaw called Duralast, which they provide commercial roofings, is also a member of the Holcim family. So anything that you need to essentially build a commercial building, Holcim will have some type of product to go ahead and build that. But you ask yourself, why are we here today to talk about maritime and port issues? Is that, Michigan's waterways are essential for our continued success in terms of being able to provide all the products that you need to go ahead and build the buildings that you're looking to build. And so with that today, I've brought a host of folks to hear and kind of talk about maritime and port activity, why it's important to us, and then also touch on the Michigan Maritime and Port Assistance Office, which I don't know if some of you know is actually housed in MDOT. Hopefully when they presented, they talked about it a little bit. But there are areas of concern with that office that we want to bring to you today and hope that you would be able to address. So as you see, I've also got Chuck Ryzak, who is our Director of Marine Operations. So he's overseeing all of our operations in the Great Lakes and on the East Coast. So we do move material on the East Coast of the United States. And then Kyle Burleson, who is the State Advocacy Director for the American Waterways Operators, which is an organization we're a member of, but they represent over, 350 operators here in the United States that are moving material on water. So our agenda today and kind of what we're looking to talk about is, one, provide Holcim's insights on the Great Lakes, provide an overview of the Michigan Maritime Port and Activity and their infrastructure, and then review that Port Assistance Fund and program. So from here, I'm going to turn it over to Kyle, and he's going to give an overview of kind of maritime activity here in Michigan. Kyle?
Thanks, Andrew. Good afternoon, Chair Steele, Ranking Member Morgan. I appreciate the opportunity to testify today about the maritime industry and the need for the Michigan Maritime and Port Facility Assistance Grant Program. My name is Kyle Burleson. I serve as Director of State Advocacy for the American Waterways Operators. AWO is the tugboat, towboat, and barge industry's advocate, resource, and united voice for safe, sustainable, and efficient transportation on America's waterways, oceans, and coasts. We're in our 81st year of advocating on behalf of the largest segment of the domestic maritime industry, with member companies operating in just about every state that has a navigable coastline or waterway, as well as in Puerto Rico. Drilling down on that, we have 3 member companies headquartered in Michigan, and more than that call them Michigan ports. Well, we are a national organization. I live in Grosse Pointe Park and work in a number of states where AWO has members. Thinking locally, the maritime industry supports over 12,000 jobs in the state of Michigan and over $700 million in labor income. That translates to nearly $3 billion contributed to the state GDP, $91 million in state and local tax revenue. The maritime industry is critical to the state's automotive industry, with iron ore that becomes steel that goes directly into automotive components. Additionally, sand, gravel, and cement and other road building materials are most effectively moved over to the water, reducing transportation costs and the wear and tear on our roads, which don't need to be taxed any further. Moreover, liquid products such as asphalt and oil products move safely on our waterways, keeping them off the roads, preventing spills and other accidents. The positive attributes of maritime transportation are many. In summary, maritime transportation is the safest, greenest, and most cost-effective way to move cargo. Moving cargo on barges generates about 15 grams of carbon dioxide per ton mile, so that's moving a ton of cargo 1 mile. Compare that to 22 grams of CO2 generated by railroads, which is still pretty good. But 141 grams per ton mile generated by trucks. So all modes of transportation have their role in the supply chain, but the more products move on water, particularly heavy bulk products like sand, steel, iron ore, the better it is for the environment, our roads, our drivers, and our pedestrians. Before joining AWO, I served in various capacities at the Detroit-Wayne County Port Authority, where I worked with Senator Chang, then Senator Schmidt, and then Representative O'Malley, to create the Maritime and Port Facility Grant Assistance Program. Assistance, it's a mouthful, sorry. We had a tremendous amount of support from Paul Lamar in the Port of Monroe. He sends his regards, he couldn't be here today. This program was modeled after a similar program that's been in place in Wisconsin for several decades and has helped expand ports throughout the Badger State. Similarly, the state of Ohio adopted this model several years before Michigan. And I have to say the Michigan graduate in me can't stomach saying this, but Ohio does such a better job embracing the maritime industry than we do here, and we call ourselves the Great Lakes State. We really got to do better. There's a lot of work to be done. Not just because we want to beat Ohio, but there's a lot of needs there. That starts with fully funding the Maritime and Port Facility Assistance Grant Program. Marine infrastructure is very expensive. There's no way around that, but it's also extremely durable and extremely resilient. If you look around any of the legacy ports in Michigan, and I think mainly the Port of Detroit region, because that's where I have the most experience, many of the docks in use were built over 100 years ago. So they've stood the test of time, but most engineers will tell you the useful life of the dock is about 50 years. They've all been repaired and maintained, but if we want to grow, improvements need to be made, and this program is a really cost-effective way to do that. And I think Chuck's presentation points out, some of the vessels they use, one of them is over 80 years old. Is it still a steamship even? You know, this isn't because Holcim's cheap. It's because these products work. And when you operate in fresh water like the Great Lakes, things last a really long time. That includes the infrastructure. So, you know, the investment the state makes really goes a long way. You know, as I said, the Great Lakes state has a lot more work to do. Funding this grant program is a really cost-effective way for the state to support maritime missions. I could go on and on, but I appreciate the opportunity to testify. As I close, I'll add that once cargo is lost to another state, another port, it takes a really long time for that cargo to come back, if ever. So I urge this subcommittee and the entire state of Michigan to take a closer look at the value of this industry, the careers it provides, which I'm happy to go into if there's time, and reinforce what I said at the outset. Our state needs the Michigan Maritime and Port Facility Assistance Grant Program. Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, committee members, thank you for having me today. Chuck Rezak, Marine Operations Director for Holcim. I'm based out of Chicago, but as you've heard us mention, our plant is based in Alpena, and it means the world to us in our business, which I'll walk you through today, a little bit about how we use the waterways here on the Great Lakes. In this picture is one of our vessels moving cement from our plant. It's a tug barge unit. This one is the GLO and Integrity, Gary Ostrander Integrity Unit. They load up to 16,000 tons of cement out of the plant at a time. I call this my 30,000-foot overview. It's kind of an introduction. And before I go too far, I mean, you heard Andrew mention how our materials you'll find, you don't know it, but you know, when you're looking at the buildings or you're at a game, yes, most of those materials come from our plants and our quarries. They're most construction materials. Holcim is not a household name because our customers are the ready mix guys, the guys you see in your neighborhoods with the drums. They're our main customers. That's who we focus on. You won't see a lot of billboards or advertising for Holcim. We're kind of a little bit behind the curtain, but all of those materials come from our company, and as Andrew mentioned, it is the largest one on the planet. This is just a quick picture of myself and my team. So I'm kind of the subject matter expert. I'm not out on the vessels. I'm managing it for a cement company. It's a small piece of what the overall company does. I have the guy in the middle, John, is our vessel scheduler. He's pointing those vessels, 3 vessels that we own on the Great Lakes, in the right direction every day and telling them how many tons to take off at each port. We have the same guy, another guy doing that same role for the East Coast, Ethan. And then Sally is our analyst who's tracking all of our KPIs and paying all of our invoices. So pretty lean team at Holcim. When one of us wants a vacation, the other one flips in and does the other's job. So just a quick overview on the team. Here's a map of our Great Lakes operations. So if you look closely, you'll see Alpena in the big brown square up there. And that's where we load our cement out of. The other cementitious material we do move is slag out of South Chicago. That's right near what's now a Cliffs plant down in Indiana Harbor. That material, slag, is a byproduct of steel production. It is cementitious, so it can go in a cement mix. It's part of our product portfolio. So our vessels are moving those 2 products, but we're moving a total of about 2 million tons, just shy of 2 million tons. The majority of that is cement. The slag I mentioned is about 250,000 tons of the 2 million. And you can see all the different locations we move it to. Pretty much, without going through them one by one, every major port or city in the Great Lakes is where we deliver our products to. 4 of those are in the state of Michigan. So you've got St. Joe, Muskegon, Essexville or Saginaw area on the Saginaw River there, and then also, of course, Detroit. We have cement terminals there where those ready mix folks come in and pick up our cement powder and take it to market. Overall, we have 11 water terminals. I mentioned that I'm just the subject matter expert at Holcim. We have a company that manages those vessels. They're out of Muskegon. They're named Andry. That's how you pronounce that. They're our partner. And Inland Lakes Management is the union labor that's on those vessels. If I had more time, I'd tell you what good paying jobs those are. You know, for folks who maybe college was not a thing for them, you can start out as a deckhand or go to a maritime academy, get onto a ship and make a pretty good living right out of the gate. It's not for everybody because you are on a boat for 30 days straight, but it's a great job for many. Many people rely on their livelihoods being supported by the maritime industry. Here's a little show and tell of our 3 vessels. One of them's a beloved, if you're on Facebook, the SS Alpina has her own Facebook page. We didn't make it. We affectionately call them boat nerds, made the page, and they follow the ship around. Right now, it's undergoing some extensive repairs because it is 83 years old. We're currently rebuilding the steam turbine. We hope to have it back out in July. But she's a gem. She's referred to sometimes as a queen or the old lady of the lakes. She's been around 83 years and delivers our cement. The other 2 are kind of similar units. They're tug barge units. They're more modern. One was built in 95 and the other in 2005. Kind of, the tug and barge is just, it's easier and more flexible to move product around than a one-piece ship for us. So that's our fleet, though, overall, if you see these out there. The 2 tug barge units say Holcim on the side. The SS Alpina, while it is our ship and we do own it, the union agreement is that we have Inland Lakes Management, the union that's on there, on the side of the ship. That's a long-standing agreement. So that's why you'll see ILM on the side of the Alpina. So keep your eye out there. They're constantly navigating the waters. Most folks don't see this, which is the beauty of maritime. You're not on the roads. You're not clogging up traffic. You're not having accidents. It's very safe, almost no spills. It's just the best way to move product environmentally, especially the 2 million tons of product that we move annually. Just a quick note, this is in our headquarters office in Chicago. We had a model made for her 80th birthday. And this is her loading on the left. That's her loading at our Alpina plant. Some of you have maybe been up there before. There's our cement silos. It's just a powder that comes down, and there are 14 spouts that load the ship at once, so we can load. That ship loads up to 12,000 tons in about 4 to 5 hours, pretty quick. And then it's out of there. Just a brief mention on the East Coast. I also have the East Coast, and Andrew thought it'd be good to just give you the scope of how important waterways are and for moving building materials around. Very similar setup to the Great Lakes. We have a cement plant in Ravenna, which is upstate New York near Albany. We have our slag facility in Sparrows Point, where we move slag. We take slag granules and grind them there, and then move them throughout the Northeast. So we have 3 what we call New York City terminals, and then New Haven, Connecticut, Providence, Rhode Island, and Boston, Massachusetts, in addition to Baltimore. So I won't go too much further in that. That's kind of a little out of the discussion, but just to show you, again, how important maritime is. Many of these states have their own, departments in their Department of Transportation that are fighting and funding maritime initiatives, such as infrastructure. Let's look at some of the look at those vessels out there. They're also tug barge units. It's a very similar way to move. So this image, I thought, kind of wrapping up my part of the presentation here, but I just thought I'd put this in front of you all. It won't look unfamiliar, but I'm not sure everyone realizes the scale of, Michigan as a maritime state. I mean, so many, you've mentioned, Madam Speaker, or Madam Chair, sorry, all the ports and harbors. I mean, you're touching 4 different lakes. It's critical to your state and the revenues that are generated out of it, and including the jobs that come out of it. So this map is available in our presentation, and it also appears on the American Association of Great Lakes Ports, has this map. This is a little too fine print, I think, for the room, but it just shows each port and how many tons of material come out of each location. So I don't know if you're close to it. We've got copies of that too that will go out, but that speaks to in greater detail the types of products and the volume of products that come out of the ports in Michigan or into the ports of Michigan, both. So very essential. Again, appreciate your time to show you a little bit about what Holcim does and how meaningful it is to have our operations here in the great state of Michigan.
Thanks to Chuck and Kyle for providing all that background and information. And now I want to go into a little bit about the Maritime and Port Assistance Fund. And so signed into law in 22, bills from Senator Chang and Representative O'Malley essentially created the Maritime and Port Assistance Office in MDOT. And with that, a fund was also attached to that office. And so in fiscal year '24, a one-time appropriation of $5 million was provided to the fund. But from that point, no other financial obligations have been offered to the program. And the $5 million was sent out the one round of grants that the office offered. They were able to grant out the entire $5 million to folks asking for assistance. Now with that, the grants do have a limit of $2.5 million, right? So you can't ask for the full 5 or whatnot, but you can be awarded up to $2.5 million, and then the applicant has to certify with the office that they're currently compliant with all state and federal environmental laws, right? So commonly what we have to do for like a PD or PIDP grant, which is run through the U.S. Department of Transportation, or other type of grants, we also have to provide environmental impacts and environmental information to show that we are continually staying compliant with the law. Out of that, though, what the funds can really be used for, right? And so, you know, anything we can do to increase port activity. So if there's a way to bring in new commerce, a way to kind of grow the port, whatnot, what have you, the fund can be used for that. Improving green maritime certification, you know, matching federal funding, right? I think matching federal funding is something that, you know, all states are interested in working on and find ways to make their investment go even further. But dredging is really big. And as we see the lake levels rise and fall, the need for continuing upgrades and upkeep of ports is critical to ensure that boats can be able to move material in and out of the ports. And dredging is key with that. And so, but then other than you look into repairing seawalls, moving to cleaner technologies, and other projects that the office feels is appropriate. And so today, you know, we're asking, and we'd like for you to consider to actually put a line item in the budget and provide at least $10 million appropriation for that fund. We know the need is there. We've had conversations to know that there are ports all across the state that have asked for some support in terms of being able to provide the upkeep or provide the innovation that they need at their ports to continue to move cargo back and forth. For us, it's critical, right? We move 90% of our material from Alpena goes by water. And so we cannot get the building blocks out for the state of Michigan without having the Great Lakes. And if we don't have a place to park the boat, you know, we're running into problems. So again, we thank you for the time today. If you look, there's the Gordie Howe Bridge. That also has a ton of our material in it, because that silo just underneath it there, I know it's a little blurry, but that is our terminal in Detroit. So we actually worked with the state and Canada to allow them to put the footing down on our property to go ahead and put the bridge up. So with that, Madam Chair, thank you so much. We appreciate the time to be here today, and we are here to answer any questions you may have.
Well, thank you. And you may or may not be able to answer some of these just because, just to clarify, MDOT is only responsible for one port, and that's the Detroit Port Authority. And so there's 33 other ports across the state of Michigan. And so when people ask for the grants, from my understanding, MDOT goes through the grant applications and they administer the funds for those specific grants. That's how, but you know, there's enough other people in here, Max might even be able to answer some, I'm not sure if that's how it's done. And so I say all that to say, my question is, do you know which ports were improved with those grants? or how many are you able to use all the ports for your, you probably don't need to use them all, but are they even capable of handling your boats to come into those specific ports? And like, how many do you think that need to be improved? Because they're owned by authorities, they're owned by private owners, and so these would be grants that would be fixing those the different ports.
Yeah, so I'll take the second one. Kyle might know the first one a little bit, being kind of locked in that. But the second one, it's, Chuck showed the map where we have all of our locations, right? For us to be able to bring a boat in, we have to have a place to dump our material. So we would need a terminal there. So that would be about another $5 to $20 million investment within that port for us to be able to bring material in. We do need a deep water facility for us to bring our boats in. So that's the 3233 that are that deep water port around the state that we would be able to do that. But how we have everything now with our distribution network and being able to move our product and connecting with our customers, we are pretty strategically located across the state to make sure our material gets to where it needs to go. So
You're just saying further improvements to the facilities that you already use would be helpful to you?
correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yep.
Madam Chair, if I can add, the Detroit-Wayne County Port Authority is the only port authority in the state of Michigan. The Port of Monroe is organized under an older Port District Act. Under that statute, the state provides half of the funding for the organization. The city and the county each provide 25%. That has been driven by state appropriation, with the state saying, okay, here's your half. The Port Authority gets roughly $1 million a year, and that in total, and that number has not changed since 1978. I spent about 9 years at the Port Authority trying to change the way everything gets funded, and we don't have enough time to talk about the roadblocks I ran into. Bill's well aware. We spoke about it a lot in the past. As far as the initial round of grant funding, I believe it was the Port of Monroe got a portion of that. They're building a container terminal there, which will be the first of its kind in the state of Michigan. And Detroit might have been the other one. I know that as I was leaving the Port Authority, they started to undertake a very big decarbonization plan. We were able to get $1 million from the state in an earmark, in 2020 or 2021, to look at how to better decarbonize port facilities. And as on the other side of the industry now, I will say, we're very proud of the industry's sustainability record. There's obviously more work that can be done, and we think that companies should go about that at their own pace. They shouldn't be dictated. But in the Port of Detroit, they're looking at doing a better job for the residents around them and reducing emissions, whether it's electrifying equipment or engine upgrades for forklifts and cranes and stuff like that. But I believe it was Monroe and Detroit, and I apologize, I'm not positive about that, but I think that was the case.
Thank you for having knowing that information from your previous career or job. But when you say Ohio's beating us, are they moving more tonnage, or do they have more ports, or are they just more updated? And then Rep. Morgan, you have a question after.
Yeah, Ohio has fewer ports, particularly on the Great Lakes, but they do handle a tremendous amount of tonnage. I believe it's more. Port of Toledo is enormous. They have massive agricultural export facilities run by ADM. They have a steel mill. Cleveland has, I think I mentioned, the only container service between the Great Lakes and Belgium, and between Europe and the Great Lakes. It's from Antwerp to Cleveland. The port authorities in Ohio under state law are able to be a lot more flexible in what they do. They're able to issue revenue bonds to generate funding for projects like, for example, the Port of Cleveland financed the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They finance a practice facility for the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Port of Toledo owns the airport there. So they're able to do a lot more. We didn't want to go that far, but I spent a lot of time trying to get a little bit closer to that to eventually get off government funding, because they don't receive government funding there. They're able to create their own money. But like I said, I ran into a lot of roadblocks that aren't worth mentioning today. Yeah.
Yeah, I think on our side, sorry, just to interject for Holcim, we have a major terminal in Toledo, And then we have aggregate docks and a terminal on the Cuyahoga River in Cleveland. So we go right downtown Cleveland with all of our material.
I was just going to add too, as we talk about funding and putting a line item in the budget, it's not just, I'm giving you an example of our example, but in places where we have terminals like St. Joe, Michigan, Muskegon, the Saginaw River, and in Detroit, of course, we're not the only tenant. Like, we're here on behalf of the industry. We think it's a worthwhile cause for all of the materials and cargoes that were on that really detailed slide that we'll give you a presentation on. We're just giving you, we're one example, very dependent, but it would be for anybody.
And that's an answer that you probably don't know, but I'm curious on how many other vendors use the ports. I mean, in the state of Michigan, I have no idea.
I can tell you in the Port of Detroit, there's about 20, depending on the state of the economy, between 22 and 27 privately owned terminals within the port region. The Port Authority is not a landlord. Like, we own one cargo facility, everything else is privately held. Most of it's along the Rouge River.
Yeah, and one of the handouts we provided today, I think from the American Great Lakes Port Association, if you look on the back of it, you can see it lists out the type of materials that are running in and out of the different ports around Michigan. So with that, you can kind of get a good idea of, it's not just us moving cement, but, there's steel, there's aggregates, there's timber, there's a whole bunch of other stuff, gypsum, that are moving around that, rely on the ports being there.
Thank you for that, and I just know it's really important to try to keep some of that traffic off our roads for the longevity of our roads. So, Rep. Morgan?
Thank you, Chair, and I would agree. I think anything that we can do to get some of that traffic onto rail or onto boats and ships, I think is a great thing for everybody. So this is really exciting. This is great. I see a lot of these barges out there when I'm on Coast Guard duty on the Detroit River, and they're fascinating. So it's really cool to hear that. I had not heard the history of the one in Alpena there. It sounds like that's quite the history. So thank you for being here today. The question I have for you, I guess I'll ask two kind of quick questions here. One is just if you can comment if there are issues regarding water levels that you would be dealing with. And the second is just if there are policy suggestions or things that we could do to be more helpful or supportive here in Michigan, as you were talking about the comparison to Ohio and some of those things. If you can share thoughts on those things.
First of all, thank you for your service in the Coast Guard. AWO has I believe, 30-year-old agreement with the Coast Guard to work together on safety regulations. We actually went to the Coast Guard and the entire federal government, about 20 years ago, saying if you regulated us more, we would be safer, greener, and have better outcomes for customers. And so we've done that and work hand in glove with the Coast Guard. But a couple ideas off the top of my head other states do, and I'm not suggesting these would work here, but the state of Virginia allocates a portion of its sales tax revenue to ports. Obviously it's a Navy town, but the Port of Norfolk is absolutely massive. When the Key Bridge collapsed in Baltimore, it was that sort of funding, then the flexibility that funding allowed the Port of Norfolk to stand up more temporary holding areas for cargo and stuff like that, because there was a time where vessels couldn't get to Baltimore. Baltimore being, I believe, the biggest automotive port on the East Coast. There was a lot of cargo that had to get offloaded before Baltimore, and so Norfolk did that quite well. State of Louisiana has not just one office within its Department of Transportation regarding maritime, but two. One of them has to do with petroleum exploration offshore. Obviously, that wouldn't apply to us. But they also have an inland maritime office as well that looks at all of the maritime cargo, whether they're deep draft vessels coming in from overseas or the tug and barge industry, which is quite massive down there. I think that one thing we could do now, and this was already authorized by the same law that created the grant program, was to create the Maritime and Port Facility Assistance Office. So that's created in law, and what MDOT did is they took one person from the Office of Freight Rail and said, oh, by the way, this is now part of your job. You get to do this. Now, she is a very capable person. She's very good at her job, but the Great Lakes state should have some dedicated people that are looking at maritime. Not just the infrastructure improvements, but how do you track maritime-based businesses to reactivate some of these ports? We were just chatting in a meeting before this, the Port of Harbor Beach has shut down since DT closed the power plant. Now, when you close that power plant, you lose the coal tonnage, which means you're losing federal dredging dollars. Now, I believe the Coast Guard still has a facility there, but it's not manned full-time. But in so many of these commercial places like Harbor Beach, or what used to be commercial places, there's also recreational harbors. And that dredging, those federal dredging dollars help that mission too. Water levels are definitely on the downswing after a few years of record highs. So I think having some folks with an MDOT to work on this stuff would be critical. There's also a major challenge right now with Eagle. You know, they want to go well above and beyond federal standards for testing for PFAS and disposing of dredge spoils for PFAS. Now, obviously a lot needs to be done to understand the impact of these chemicals, but what they're proposing is going to cut the number of federal dredging projects that can happen in half or even a quarter of what it could be because of the increased cost of this. I know we're working to chat with them about this. Certainly we got to figure out the impact of these chemicals. We don't think the right time to do this though is when water's on the downswing and there are harbors that could effectively be shut off, which has giant commercial impacts as well as recreational impacts for small towns that rely on summer boating traffic.
I'll speak to the water levels, peaked my, my senses there because it is impacting us now. And I don't have the Corps of Engineers has a graph on how water levels, they're basically, they're cyclical. And about every 10 years, you get high water and then it turns to low water over those 10 years. We're on, Kyle just mentioned, we're on the downswing. We're heading towards lower water. Dredging is becoming a much more needed thing for all of the ports. We rely on the Army Corps for some of it, but they can't be everywhere at once. So we're pursuing our own dredging up at Alpena right now as we speak. So right now our vessels can load to 15,000, but we're only loading them to 12.5 max. So we are not maximizing what we can bring to market. That's a business problem for us. So we will take on some of the, if we need to dredge ourselves, we will. But that's some of the grant, you can expect to see a lot of the grants there. I know the St. Joe River, you know, is constantly an area where it's filling in and needs to be dredged. We're on there. I know there's an ag dock further down. There's a couple businesses in St. Joe there that use the river that, you know, they're begging for dredging as well in that harbor. So water levels are heading down. It is and they're going to continue to head down for the next few years. So you'll hear more and more concern about dredging as we go on, which, you know, this kind of money could be allocated towards.
Rep. Slaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And you just took care of one of my questions, was the whole dredging thing. I was really interested in that. And the only part that you didn't really answer for me is what is the depth that you think that we should be at in those ports, typically?
Our vessels, we're preparing to dredge up there. Our cement vessels, which load pretty deep, I mean, they need deep water. And the only places they go to where they're fully loaded at 15,000 are Detroit and Milwaukee over in Wisconsin. Then we'll lighter there to go to the other locations. But that's 26 feet plus 1 foot of keel clearance.
Okay.
So you call it 27.
All right.
If the port allows for it, if there's not bedrock there or something.
And that's the same depth as the St. Lawrence Seaway. So any foreign ships that come in draw the same amount. You know, the Lakers you see, the 1,000 footers, they'll draw upwards of 30 feet. Okay. You know, the federal channels, I believe, are authorized to 35 or 40 feet.
Okay. Can I ask another question? So one of the interesting things, my wife would be a boat nerd, so one of the interesting things that I heard you say was that from a vessel configuration, that the tug-barge combination is better than just a single ship. But I'm interested in that. Why?
To be quite honest, I mean, quite frank, the requirements for crewing a single ship are a lot larger. This is the financial side of it. You do need 18 to 21 people on a full ship, whereas on a tug barge, because of the manning requirements for the Coast Guard, you can get away with like 10 or 11.
Wow.
So you need about half the crew, number one. Number two, it's easier to make modifications on a tugboat or swap a tugboat in. Your cement barge is unmanned. That's not really going to change. It's just basically a floating tray, if you will. Mm-hmm. If you need to make upgrades, whether it be engines or anything that's an environmental regulation coming in or living quarters or whatnot, it's much easier to either make those modifications to a smaller part of the boat or bring in a new tugboat, but your barge can last much longer than the tugboat. So
you.
there's a number of advantages.
There's a lot of versatility involved, and a lot of the old Lakers have become those ATBs, those articulated tug and barge units, because you can cut out the engine house, and it's cheaper to buy a tugboat and put it in rather than repower, and then you have the decreased manning requirements. And like I said, the versatility. You can pull one boat out if it needs work and pull another one in. You're not dry docking the whole vessel.
And just one last comment. Do you have any affiliation to the maritime academies at all? I didn't even know that they existed until I was on this committee, so it's really interesting.
Not officially from AWO's standpoint. We obviously support, I believe there's 6 state maritime academies, as well as the U.S. federal one, Kings Point Merchant Marine Academy. Michigan has the Great Lakes Maritime Academy in Traverse City. They train, to use a military comparison, the maritime academies train the officers versus, the enlisted men and women, don't need that degree. But we work hand in glove with a lot of the labor unions that do the training for mariners. I know the Great Lakes Maritime Academy is about to get a tugboat that was retired from service in the St. Lawrence Seaway. So they'll be able to start offering more tug and barge specific programs. I know Admiral Achenbach up there quite well. I know they're really excited about that. Yeah.
Thank you for knowing that.
Yeah, our vessel operator, Andrew, that I mentioned out of Muskegon, they have a relationship with the Maritime Academy in Michigan, and we're supportive of them as our operator. They've been our operator for 30 years. So we support them attending there and recruiting from there. And I mean, without going, this is a whole other topic, but there is a shortage of mariners everywhere in the country.
I'm glad we have the schools. So, any further questions? Okay. So thank you very much for your presentation. I really appreciate you coming in today. And with that, there being no further questions and no further business before the committee, this meeting is adjourned.